Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, station manager for Manatee Educational Television. And as part of our Legacy of Valor outreach, over the last few months, we've had the privilege and the honor of interviewing a lot of people who have really part of the greatest generation. And with us today is one of those individuals, Robert Jacob Kyser. Bob, thank you very much for being here and joining us today. And we really appreciate it, and I think your story is very compelling, and I think people are going to be most interested in it. You know, Bob is a veteran of both World War II and Korea and served his country during both of those conflicts. But before we get into that, Bob, let's just get a little background, if we may. Tell us a little bit about where you're from.
Originally, I was born in Dowellsville, New York.
Where about in New York is that?
It's Herkimer County. It's called the Mohawk Valley, the Southern Mohawk Valley.
Okay.
Very close to Little Falls, New York. So that kind of is like the central location.
So you're born there, you grew up there, and you and your family, and you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I lived there till I was 5. I had a brother 4 years older than I am. And we moved from there to Johnstown, New York, in the Gloversville area.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And then that's where you ended up going to school for most of your life?
I went to school to the 5th grade in Amsterdam, and we moved to Glens Falls, New York. My dad was transferred. And there I went into the 6th grade, and I finished high school there and made our home there, and I was married there.
And you were married there, so we're going to get to that a little bit later, but you know, around that period of time, you know, when you're going through school, just being a young man, growing up, probably you don't miss those cold winters, do you?
Not much.
Well, but war was developing, and your brother, your older brother, had enlisted a couple of years prior. Tell us about him and when he enlisted.
My brother enlisted, I think the precise date was right around the end of 41. And he became of course, in the Navy, and he became a aviation mechanic. And he was aboard the PBY Mariners as sub-chasers. And he had quite a career there too.
So he's a couple of years older, right after Pearl Harbor he probably enlisted.
Correct.
And then you were still in school then at that point.
I was, when I enlisted, I was a sophomore. And I left high school. And to make a long story short on that one, I realized what a mistake I had made after I got in the military. So I finished my education later, but I did have a very unique military experience where I had very, very unique training. So.
And we want to talk a little bit about that, but you were a young man. You were 17 years old.
17, correct.
And you know, going in enlisted, you know, everyone refers to that generation as the greatest generation. So you came home and you told your folks, your mom and dad, that, you know, I need to enlist. And how did they feel about that?
Well, at first they weren't very excited about it, to be very truthful. In fact, my dad said, if you want a military experience, there's a couple of military schools that we can go to. And I was quite disappointed when I heard that, but I kept after them, and I just said, you know, that's where I want to go, what I want to do. And my father and my mother sat down, they sat with me, and they said, well, you didn't run off and join. You've been a good boy, et cetera, and so they signed me up and gave me the permission to do it. And I was sworn in Albany, New York, and that was in July the 7th. And I came back home, and I was sent the letter of that I had been accepted, and et cetera, and was going to be stationed in Sampson, New York.
And you enlisted in the Navy, just so we know. You
Navy.
enlisted in the United States Navy. And, you know, I'm not sure if this was your enlistment picture, but I'm going to hold this up. And there's a pretty handsome young man here with a great-looking uniform on. And how old were you when this was taken?
17.
You were 17.
Just out of boot camp.
Just out of boot camp. You look pretty pleased to be in uniform there.
Well, I was home on leave. My mother maybe came with me and had my picture taken.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about the enlistment and that time. And you went into boot camp and the training that you underwent.
Well, it was actually basic military training, and it was for 12 weeks. And after that 12 weeks, they separated people, and they had a qualification. You took what they called an IQ test, and they almost predetermined where you were going to go. And actually, at the time, they determined in the end where you were going to be assigned.
Right.
And I was assigned to go into the amphibious units, and I was
It's tough units to be in at that time.
Yeah, that was a classic outfit. And I was sent to Fort Pierce, Florida, and I took my amphibious training there. And from there, they sent me in to be a signalman.
Oh.
And so I started to be training as a signalman, and through a small accident I had, I was hanging up clothes. We lived in tents.
Right, right.
And I was climbing up on a fence to hang my clothes up. We had a big clothesline up. We had to take it down after the day so it wasn't up in the night. And so I fell off of that and went out sideways, and I injured my right hip there. And so they took me over to the dispensary, and the doctor over there said, "Now I want you to go to the hospital." And I ended up in the hospital for a couple of days. I was all right, though. I was fine. And the surgeon was my doctor. He was talking with me all this time over there, and he was a survivor in a life raft for a couple of days there one time on some ship. I don't remember what it was, but anyways. He said, "You know, you're cut out to be a medic." He said, "I can read it in you." So he said, "We're going to see what we can do about that." That's where everything started.
And that was as a result of just a random accident.
A random accident.
And, you know, through the encouragement of this doctor, kind of led you into that medical training.
Right.
And tell us a little bit about that, how you transitioned from that into the medical
Well, it
field.
wasn't right away. I still had to be, I still was assigned to the amphibious unit. And we were trained to drive the small boats, the little LSVPs, all 36 men in a Jeep. And we had a crew build up, and he said the crew was going to stick together, so I was with that crew. Well, that ended the thoughts about being a medic at that time.
Right.
So anyways, so we were assigned, and we went to Bradford, Virginia to make up a crew for a ship, which was the LST-1060. And
so the LST-1060 was just a small vehicle, wasn't
about
it?
790 feet in length.
That's not that big.
60 foot of beam, and we could transport, I can't remember how many troops and tanks. We had 2 decks. We had a big bow ramp it open. I have a picture of it there if you'd like.
Yeah, and we're going to hold that picture up during the thing because those were the vehills that
were the biggest landing ship they had at that.
When ashore, any kind of invasion or landing.
Right. We could carry LCVPs on our main deck and launch them. So, which we did.
So here you are. You're back up in Virginia now.
Yeah, Bradford, Virginia.
With your unit. You know, the war is still going on.
Yeah.
And so what's next for you?
Well, we were trained as a crew. They sent us to Boston, the Fargo building in Boston. And they said, "You guys are the crew for a new ship being built." And we were picked off, as the whole crew was brought together, and we were all trained together. And the ship was being built as we were.
Specifically, a newer landing.
Yeah, right. At the Bethlehem shipyards up there. So it was put together, and the crew manned the ship, and we put it in commission in February. And we were only 2 days after commissioning, we were underway.
Underway from the shipyard itself?
From the shipyard. We went over and got fueled and supplied, ammo, everything else.
And where'd you ship out to? I mean, did you know at that time where you were going?
Really, nobody knew where we were going except the skipper at that time. We shipped out of Boston. We went down through the Cape Cod Canal down into Virginia. And we staged in Virginia and did a lot of exercises down at landings and et cetera, like that. And I don't want to get too much into that.
But that's a lot of training. They obviously
tremendous
had
amount of training.
They obviously were training.
That's where my medical training started to begin.
Oh.
And I was taken aside by a first-class pharmacist mate, they called him in those days. We were all pharmacist mates. And he was an instructor trainer in the Navy at that time. And we had 4 of those aboard. He took me aside and started my beginning apprentice training.
Oh.
And from there, went on
You
later.
just developed it.
Yeah.
Because, being a medic and, obviously having, there's a lot of intricate and complex things and very detailed stuff that one has to learn and kind of assimilate.
Exactly.
Because that medic and Navy medics especially are considered, probably the best trained of all the services. But you think that's correct?
That's correct. And then from Virginia, we left there and we went to New York. And we loaded some stores on at New York, and we put aboard, I think, 7 or 8 military personnel that nobody was aware of who they were or what they were. And we shoved off of there for Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Right.
So you're leaving from New York.
Right. We were loaded at that time too.
And you're going from New York. So you obviously went through the canal.
Canal, right.
And then out to sea, and then through the canal all the way up through the Pacific.
Correct.
And then your next port of call was Hawaii, which was a huge staging area for the war.
Right. Leaving New York though was an interesting story. We left there and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, the fog. And I wasn't on deck, but the friend of mine was a signalman, so he was on deck most of all the time up on the bridge. And we were leaving New York. He come down after we got out of the harbor, and he said, I'm done for the day. And he was sweating. The water was rolling up, and he said, we come this close to hitting a Liberty ship.
Oh.
He said you could have reached over and shook hands with the guys on the ship going through when we were going out of New York Harbor.
Well, without when in heavy fog like that, with ships moving quickly.
You have a lot of interesting little things that happen that doesn't show up.
Well, on board ship, there's a lot of things that are happening all the time.
That nobody some of the things you're aware of, and some of them you're not. So.
But there's a great camaraderie too.
With the Navy,
with your fellows.
Shipmates.
There's teamwork involved and all of that. There's work to be done, but at the same time, you bond with your crew on board.
You certainly do, right. And usually you'll pick up group. All of us bond as a ship, and you're off the 1060. You are the 1060. That's it. But then there's little groups in between that net up too.
Right.
And like the older guys that were on the ship there with us, they were mostly, poker players and like this. Right. The young guys that came
in. You're 17 years old on a ship
I was the youngest guy on the ship. And I and a fellow by the name of Jake Lambert. He was the signalman. And we used to, they'd get in and they'd say, come on, kid, you want to play some poker?
They're looking for the young fellas.
They'd say, get your money out.
Well, tell us a little bit about life on a ship, though. I mean, obviously, they weren't built for comfort. There
was no air conditioning.
Right.
And you had your showers, and when you're out at sea, we only could make, I think it was 8,000 gallons of water a day with our distilling units on that ship. And so when they rationed water,
it was pretty difficult.
When you got out, we were underway 22 days and 22 nights one time.
My goodness.
And that's without stopping. We were with a task force. And we had saltwater showers, of course, with the big yellow bar of soap.
How was the food? How was the food on board ship when you're at sea?
When you're hitting ports in and out, it's very good. I mean,
but when you're underway.
And but when you're out quite a while, when we got really over in the South Pacific, it was good. Let's say for what was out there.
Sure.
Believe me. So,
sure.
And I cannot really knock it. I could not knock that food. No.
Then they want to keep everybody happy.
Not really. Here I am. I'm sitting here with you at 87.
So after you left New York and you headed towards Hawaii, I mean, you're headed out towards. The
Panama Canal.
Panama Canal.
I went through the Panama Canal. out from the Panama Canal. We were overnight there, and they had starboard, one side Liberty, and the other, when they came back, the other side had Liberty.
Right.
And then the ship stayed there for I think, 8 hours to get everybody sober.
Oh.
So we could go the rest of the way.
Really? Why was that? Why was that?
It was, I guess
You don't get that much liberty on board a ship.
no, you don't. Not when you're overseas. They can say you've been all over, but you haven't been on land that much.
Well, that's great. So you got up to Hawaii finally,
Right?
And you got to Hawaii, a great staging area. But you know, the mission though was to go out into the South Pacific.
Correct.
And that's where your ship headed, correct?
Correct.
And tell us where you guys were headed after you left Hawaii.
We left Hawaii and we went back to Seattle, Washington. And we went to a little town. We anchored off at, no, we docked in Bremerton overnight, and we picked up a couple of other ships. There was 8 ships in the little task force they had. We were the GT head of that unit, and they were all LSDs. And we went up the river there in Bremerton to Everett, Washington.
Right.
And we loaded with troops up in Everett, Washington. They were, I think it was, I don't remember whether it was the 66th Engineering Division or something like that was part of it. And we came back out of there and we went back to Hawaii. And from Hawaii we went off, then we went into for Saipan, Tinian, and Guam and all those areas down there.
Now that was going into a war zone at that point.
Right, at that point, yes. But like Guam and Tinian and them, they were secured islands, but there was still fighting going on in parts of them. But they were secured as far as the invasion like that. We owned the island, was secured.
But here, your responsibility, you know, in the Navy now, it kind of changed. You were now doing more medic responsibilities.
Yes, right.
And then you were responsible for the care and well-being of all of those sailors.
Yeah, I was with 3 others at that time. I was the apprentice.
Oh.
And then I had more training after that, but that's another story in itself.
Sure,
so
we'll get to that.
I'll get around to that for you. But
so you're here. You're going through Marshall Islands and everything, and your medical responsibilities. And then you underwent through Saipan. Did you went there?
yeah, we went to Saipan and Tinian. We anchored off Saipan for a while, and then we were at Tinian, and from Tinian we went to Guam. We're in and out of Guam twice, but at that time now, Okinawa was being taken, and that was over with. But when we went in from there, from Guam to Okinawa, we went to Ayashima first, and Ayashima was still, it was secured, but it was not.
It was still a battleground.
They were still battling in some areas of it. You know, it was mostly snipers and like that. When we pulled into Ayashima, we had this one spot we were going into land, this engineering group, and there was 2 LSTs that we had seen before, months before that, up in the Washington area when we were up there.
Right.
They were both sunk.
Really?
Yep, we were both sunk, one right next to the other, just
Okay.
like we pulled in a slip like this onto the beach and anchored right next to it. And
Kind of gives you a pause there. You know,
the old man come out and he said, "Take a good look."
Take a good
Over
look.
the microphone, take a good look. He said,
That had to, you know,
it got us a
make you
little
realize
nerved
that,
up,
you know, things are going to be
yeah.
a little bit more.
I've got pictures of Ernie Piles.
Sure, we have some of them here, and some great pictures. We're going to be doing these throughout the program. But you know, you look around, you're moving, you know, you know that there's a major war going on. Troops are moving. You know, there's airplanes. There's combat in different areas of it. You know, as a young sailor, and you're what now, probably still 17 or maybe 18 at this point.
No, I wasn't 18 yet.
Not 18 yet.
I'll tell you when I was 18.
I mean, it's a heavy responsibility. You know, feeling that.
Right.
You know, I mean, but you know, you had a great team. You're working with great leaders at the time. Your commanders. How did you feel about the services that you were providing?
I'm not reading you right what you mean now.
Well, how do you, I mean, here you are, you're a young man. You got a lot of responsibilities for a 17-year-old.
But you know, I'll tell you this, until I had left that, I had no realization of what I was doing.
How important.
How important it was, and you know, and the things I was doing. And I don't think anybody really knows that at that time.
They were just doing their job.
They were doing their job, and in fact, doing it well. And you just wanted to be, you know, you're taking care of your own guys there. I mean, it's just like family.
Yeah.
And when you take a look at somebody that's got to have help, you're there for that. You know, there's no big deal about it. You know,
and I think a lot of people, they just feel, you know, they're just doing their duty, doing their everyday job, wanting to be a part of the big effort.
Exactly. It's like being a father at home. You're doing your job as it's supposed to be done.
So here you are, you're 17, you've been, you know, halfway around the world. You know, you're in these ports that are still, you know, a risky business at best. And, you know, where did you go after that? As you're going through Saipan, then you're on to Okinawa, which still is a war zone.
Yeah, right. Well, the war, of course, at that time was over when we were there. So they assigned the LSTs that were all out. Most of the LSTs that we were in, our flotilla, was assigned to a special group. And they sent us into, first of all, we went to Japan, and the peace treaty was being signed aboard the USS Missouri up there. We went in, and then we went to an island, the North Island of Japan, not Honshu, but the northernmost island. And we landed at a Jap Air Base, Ominato.
Ominato Air Base.
Now, we brought on some troops at Guam, and we had them with us. They were an Acorn unit, a Naval Air Corps unit. And that's a Naval Air unit. And we landed up there. It was a seaplane base. And we went in, secured that area ourselves. And actually, I'm right in the process now of finding out if we might have been the first ones to commission a base in Japan.
Wow, that's significant.
Our crew on our ship, our
was one
skipper,
of the first ones
was the first ones there, and we commissioned the base. Actually, brought all the guys, the troops. I got a picture of that.
Oh, great! And, and I think that's significant because as a landing, unit, they probably wanted a unit like yours to be in the forefront of it. So, and these are some wonderful pictures that we're going to put up as well. But, you know, here is the unit all dressed up and, you know, in your navy blues.
First time we had our blues, well, they weren't all blues. We had the peacoats on.
Oh, yeah, peacoats on there. That's a little cool then, was it?
Yeah, I'll say.
Well, here you are, you're the thing, and you know, this is probably around 45 after the peace treaty had been signed.
Right, yes.
And here you are.
Right.
17 still.
It was very close to the end of 45.
Right.
And up at those bases in there. In fact, we were in there, I think, at the holidays and Christmas at Ominato, and back and forth out of there. So
out of the. But at some point, the war ends.
Right.
You know, great celebration, feeling great among your fellow sailors. You know, you've done your service, and then then you head home.
No,
Not yet.
They sent my ship and another ship, the 979, to Hong Kong to pick up Japanese troops that had been, or Chinese troops that had been captured over there, and they were in their military compounds. And we picked them up, and we transported them back from Hong Kong up to Qingwangtao, up in the North China Sea.
No kidding.
Now that's right on the line where Tibet, the Great Wall of China, comes down this way.
And these were troops that were captured by the Japanese that had been in prison camps.
Exactly.
And then as part of your service to do is to relocate these people back to China.
We made, I think, 2 trips into Qingwangtao and back to China, and then they sent us into Shanghai. And we picked up Jap troops, Jap surrenderies there, and brought them into Sasebo, back to Sasebo, this group. And then I'm going awfully fast here.
No,
Is that
no,
all right?
no, it's fascinating.
And
But that's certainly a lot of responsibility.
yeah, it was a lot of responsibility for us. And then when we came back in 40, I was just very close to the beginning of 46. Yeah, it had to be right after New Year's of 46, because I was in New Year's in Shanghai, China.
New Year's Day in Shanghai, China.
Right. And I thought I'd have brought along a shirt, and I didn't think about it.
So here you are. You're doing these, great responsibilities, relocating these prisoner of wars and enemy troops back and forth, on board these ships. You know, as a medical corpsman, were you providing care for these people as well? So,
They had their
people?
medics with them, but we supplied them. Some of them had never seen. We had gotten penicillin while we were over there, but it came in the old calcium penicillin, not like it is today. And you had to mix it. You had to
mix it
put
together.
sterile distilled water with it. And usually you got one shot was, I forget, somewhere around 5,000 units. So you'd have to pump
a lot,
about every 4 hours.
Wow.
So, I mean, if you had a good infection going or something like that. But to switch back to the story a little bit.
Sure.
When we got back to Shanghai the third time, the skipper called us, had us all out on the main deck, and he said, we've been asked by the United Nations to do some service for UNRWA. That was United Nations Relief Unit.
That's right.
So these huge cargo ships were in there full of flour and rice. So they asked the LSTs, and we were the first ones to be asked. They said, because you don't draft a lot of water,
Right.
we can load these with flour and take it up into Beijing. They're starving up in that area.
Wow.
So 979 and our ship were taken up. We're going to go up the Yangtze with it. It sounds like an easy job.
Not an easy job.
Go up, land the flour. The people will take the flour off at the docks. Like that. Okay. But you couldn't navigate the Yangtze River only during the day, because in some of the areas we had to take soundings.
To see what the depth
Yeah,
was.
get the depths of the river, and at night we had to post full armed guards on the main deck with the machine guns and everything else mounted because of the river pirates.
Oh, people
And
wanted
they'd
to
shoot
steal.
you quicker than a second on one of those ships. They'd steal you blind. And they used to travel in not just one or two,
But many.
They'd have these, what they call them, Chinese junks, or a little boat of their own.
And then they would come and say you're
they'd
sitting there.
slip up on you in the night or come up underneath the rear end of the ship, and they'd have maybe 20 guys aboard before you ever knew they were there if you didn't have guards out there.
That was dangerous work.
Damn right it was. And we had a couple of guys wounded on our ship. In fact, this guy Jake Lambert that were the last two off the ship. Jake said, "You remember the night when I went nuts and firing at this guy in the water?" I said, "Yeah." And I laugh now, but it was
Pretty
damn
scary.
serious, damn
It was had to be
serious then.
scary.
So
So you only went underway during the day.
Yes,
and
right.
then you would pull up at night.
anchor at night.
And then that way it was safer for you, not only for the ship
Correct.
itself, but safer for the crew.
Yeah. Well, finally we got to Beijing where we were going to dump the flour, and the skipper and I went ashore. He and one of the interpreters, and they got everything rearranged. And so while we were there, the interpreter said, they see you're a medic. So I said, yeah. And so the interpreter told him, yes, I was a medic. So they shook their head and they asked me if I would go up and look at their little place where they were treating people. So I got up there, and lo and behold, I see a white woman, older woman. She was in charge of the hospital.
Oh.
The hospital was of pretty good size, not 2 stories or something like
Right,
this. But it could, I think, service about 150, top
Wow.
capacity. and they were out straight. She took one look at me, I took one look at her. She says, "My God," she says, "you're the first white man I've seen here." And their top surgeon of the hospital was Japanese.
Really?
They really didn't want to repatriate him.
No, I
And
don't think so.
He loved it there. And anyways, to make a long story short, I said, geez, we were giving them the flour, they were,
Right.
in fact, they were partly in charge of how the flour was being handled. It wasn't just the hospital, but it was a group there. And so I invited her back down to the ship, and we took the boat back, our small boat back out to the ship, and showed her around, and I started showing her penicillin and sulfa drugs.
And she was amazed.
She was just blown away. So I got the guys together and we packed up, I don't know how much stuff, because I could resupply back in Shanghai. So I give them a ton of stuff. I went down to my little storage area.
Sure.
It was a big storage area. And so we loaded them up, and I went over and told them about the penicillin and how to use it, and sulfa drugs, and they knew the dressings and things, and they couldn't believe it.
It probably made a huge difference for a hospital that didn't have anything.
Yeah, right. Give them syringes and everything else, anything we could. I had the extra, I dumped on them. Just kept enough emergency stuff for a 3-day trip back. So, all sterile dressings.
And I'm sure at that point, after the war,
IV solutions. And
people had nothing. They had nothing at these places.
But here's the irony of this. That was all over with. They all thanked us up there and everything else. We left to go back to Shanghai. So the war goes on, and there's more to the story. But when I had left the Navy and come home, was separated and come home, I went back to high school. I don't want to jump ahead of the story, but finish this story.
I think this is important to say.
Okay. I went back to high school. And of course, I was at Olds County School. But anyways, the first year I'm in high school, they had assemblies, and they'd have speakers there and like this. Lo and behold, I'm sitting in there at an assembly, and this missionary's talking about China, this man. And he's talking about China and what they did over there and what his church was doing and how they did it. And it was quite interesting. And all of a sudden he said, and we were in Beijing. My ears went bang, like this. And I said, Beijing. And so when the lecture was over, I scooted back to where the backstage was and met this fellow. And I said, I was in Beijing. He said, when were you in Beijing? So he said,
are you the guy?
Perchance you're not Bob Kyser. I said, my mouth dropped, my jaw dropped. And he said, Mrs. Browning's been looking all over for you.
What a great story.
Well, here's the whole story here. She sends me back just as a little verification.
So she had passed the story of your generosity and service through her people.
Yeah, there's the letter.
And at this point, she writes you this handwritten letter to have had the chance to write you, to say hello, and to thank you for your service. Correct. And you're going above. And then after the war, you're in high school, finishing your high school degree, and then by chance you met someone. That's a wonderful story, Bob, right. And that's something that you should be really, really, really proud of.
I am.
Is that service to her and to the hospital that you did. But as you came back, you're there in high school. Are you 18 yet?
Yes.
Oh, now you're 18.
Now
okay.
I'm 18. I'm going to be 19 quick.
But you're 18. But something around in April, you come back and you're back at home and you finish your high school, and then you went on to school. You went on to college, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And tell us a little bit about your college here.
Well, I got into college with Skidmore College. Now, Skidmore at that time was a girls' school. Mm-hmm. So they, being that all the veterans are out, they said they accept 17 or 18 veterans. Mm-hmm. It could have been a little bit more than that too, I forget. But anyways, let's just say that's the figure. And I got in as one of them.
Terrific.
And they had an annex in Glens Falls. Mm-hmm. So the only time we went to the main campus in Saratoga was if we had to go to lab, some type of a lab, or if you were working on. And so I was there, but I was only there 2 years, not quite the 2 years, and I got recalled.
Well, before you got recalled, though, because I want to stop you. You're here at Skidmore. You're 17, 18, 19 years old. You've already served your country. You've been, you know, around the world. You've, you know, just been up in, you know, been in the Pacific. But something very significant happened to you in around 1950 before you got recalled. And we want to take a moment to talk a little bit about that. And what happened in August of 1950? Did anything significant ring a bell?
Well,
there?
actually, in April of 1949, I got myself engaged to probably one of the most wonderful, beautiful people in my life.
And if I may, I'm going to hold up this picture here of them. And this is a very beautiful woman here. And a pretty handsome guy there, too, at the thing. So tell us who this is.
That is the love of my life, my wife, Sue.
And Sue is here today watching as well. So, and you two met in school, or you know,
No, that's a story.
Well, tell us that story, because it's always good to know how you guys met.
Sue's brother, Phil, joined the Naval Reserve, and I was the corpsman now.
In the Naval Reserve.
Naval Reserve, and I was doing the training there. And he wanted to become a medic, so we took him in, and he did. He became a very good one, by the way. And we became very good friends. And of course, this, you know, you went to the meetings and active duty there too. So Phil and I became real good buddies. So he said, I've taken him home one day, and I dropped him off, and I'm looking over, and on the front porch is my wife. My wife to be, I should say. So you can remember seeing her sitting there. I don't know if you remember saddle shoes or not.
I do.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen pictures of them. Let's put it that way.
She's sitting there very casually with saddle shoes on. I said to Phil, "Who's the girl there?" He says, "It's my sister."
Ah.
I say, well, that started the whole thing. So.
Well, and here we are. We have another wedding photo here, and a very happy couple. And tell us how long you've been married now.
We're married 63 years now. In August of this year, it'll be 64.
And that's a wonderful thing, and a real tribute to you. But here you are. You're married in 1950, and I see you here. But something happened right around that period of time that, you know, kind of changed this. You know, you're happy. You're on your honeymoon. You're just married. What happens next, Bob?
I got recalled to the Korean War. Actually, I had my orders. My orders had been cut. We got married on the 10th of August, and the 16th I had a report.
Really?
New York at the Sands and Pearl Street Brooklyn Naval Receiving Air Station down there. So
That kind of cut that honeymoon a little bit short, didn't it?
yeah, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I was one of the first of two in the 3rd Naval District to recall because it was at a critical rate.
Well, you know, as Korea was developing the thing of there, I imagine that corpsmen, especially, you know, trained military corpsmen, such as yourself, were in great demand because they were ramping up for the Korean action. So tell us what happened next after you reported from Oakland.
Well, I reported in New York and helped set up the center down there to start receiving people in and getting what we called in the Navy squared away to get the inductees brought into us right away for physicals, and so they could get reassigned. So I was there about a month and a half, and my orders came through for Oakland, California, the Oakland Naval Hospital, a very big hospital.
Huge hospital.
And they were receiving out there patients that were frozen feet, wounded and like that, from Travis Air Force Base. They'd fly them into Travis and then take them
directly from Korea, and then they would go to
Travis, right down to Oakland Naval. Yeah.
Which was a huge hospital receiving probably hundreds of servicemen.
Right. So I was assigned there, and I was a senior corpsman there for, I think I had 2 wards, 2 63A wards. They were both carried about 60 patients apiece. It was a big hospital. And,
Big
yeah.
hospital.
Mine were all, on that ward, it was, I think on my section up there was all respiratory, all thoracic. So,
And thoracic people, I mean,
Right.
coming from the
well, there was
freezing
well,
temperatures.
there were all over. I mean, we had patients, Army or anything was all, didn't make you any difference what branch you were in at that time. But most of ours were respiratory chest cases. So.
Mm. And as a corpsman and trained, now you're, what was your rank then as you moved up, as you got?
I think I was third class. Yeah,
Third class. So you're moving up, you're receiving your recognition. But you're not in Oakland, for an extended period. You get transferred again.
Right.
And where'd you go next?
Well, ironically, it was a group of guys together who were drinking coffee and having a chin fest, and so I said, the only place I haven't been in this damn Pacific is the North Pacific. Joking.
Jokingly.
And the following morning, Chief says to me, he says, Kyser, he said, you're not going to believe it. You got your orders. I said, where? He said, you're going to the ADAC in the Aleutian Islands.
That'll teach you.
That was my first.
So you went to the Aleutian, from Oakland, California.
The Aleutian Islands.
To the Aleutian Island. What time of year was this when you got up there?
That was, I think, around October.
So it was getting a little chilly.
Yeah, a little chilly.
Yeah, a little chilly. Tell us what you were doing up in the Aleutians for the rest of your duration.
Well, when I first got there, they had 3 doctors, a main dispensary, and they had an out dispensary that was up at what they called Mitchell Field at the other end of the island. Mm-hmm. There was a big construction company doing airstrips. They were putting in brand new airstrips for the Air Force up there, but it was under Navy control. So the chief weren't there. He said, you've got the qualifications to take that dispensary over up there. So he said, you want to take it over up there for me? I said, certainly. I knew I was going to get it anyways. You might better be accommodating. So,
and so you stayed in the Aleutians for the rest of the.
I stayed in the Aleutians for the career of my lifetime up there.
Yeah. But that had to be tough, especially the winter months up there. That had to be extraordinarily tough.
It was, I think, probably the toughest duty I was ever on, as far as just maintenance and morale and like that.
Well, when you get that extreme cold up there and anything.
But I was very busy up there. I had a sick call up there that was unbelievable. Everything you can think of.
Well, so after that, the Korean War kind of winds down, and then you remained on Naval Reserve active duty. Is that correct?
I did, right.
And how long were you in the Naval Reserve active duty?
Well, I was in there till '54. I had 10 years in the Navy. And a friend of mine came up to me.
But then your service wasn't over, was it?
No, it wasn't.
You had the active duty
the next
reserve,
career began
and then you had another career. Tell us what happened after you got out of the active reserve.
Well, I was in the active reserve there, and you were kind of stymied on if you wanted to make a career of it. You were stymied as far as getting going up in rate or whatever because of the smallness of the units, and. So this friend of mine, he said, we're going to start a brand new hospital unit in Albany, New York. And he said it's going to be a training cadre hospital. He said, what would you think of joining the Army? I said, no, thank you.
No, thanks.
No, thank you. No, thank you. So anyway, he said, well, come on down with me. So I said, all right, I will. I mean, my mind was open. So I went down, and what I saw, I liked. And it wasn't much of a change for me because it was all medical.
It was all medical
now,
field.
At this time, they became like the Joint Army Navy. I don't know when you knew when they made that conversion. But all supplies were under one name. But now, all the everything was labeled the same. So you're
which made sense.
Just like a chart of accounts. It was all matched. So.
The hardest part was probably saying,
well, the difference in uniform
being the Navy uniform and getting that
right.
Army uniform on.
So I went down and they said, I took the qualifications tests and et cetera and like this. And they said, we're going to qualify you for a second lieutenant in the MSCs. And he said, take you in that way. And then you'll go from there. So I was in the process of doing it. All the papers were worked out. Took the Army tests and like this for your IQ tests and et cetera.
Right.
And we were all set for that. And this major sat down with me and he said, there's going to be an opening for a warrant. And he said, it's a brand new warrant. So there's only 3 in the military right now in the medical department. And that time it was administrative warrant, AMI, AMS, AMC, they had all of those. But this was strictly for administrative work, period. So specialist. So he said, there's only this few there. He said, I think you could make this. So I said, well, why would I do that when I can go all the way up? He said, I'll tell you, you get up to warrant W4, and he said,
You made it.
he said, you've really got it made. And he said, it doesn't look like there's any stopping in this because there's all the way up through.
That was probably pretty good advice.
So I decided, I said, no, take his advice. So I talked it over with a few other people, and they said, yeah, do it. So I studied up for it, went down. I had to meet in front of 3 officers, and I think the lowest ranking officer on there was a lieutenant colonel, and all medical. And that lasted from, I think it was 9 o'clock in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon.
Really?
The first day.
Oh, the first.
The second day, I'm on my feet in front of a panel and also chalkboards and etc. And questions fired at me that
You aced them all.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I managed to get through that.
Well, that's very impressive.
So I was made a just a
Warrant
warrant officer,
officer?
WO, period.
But then you progressed up through that.
Very
obviously made
very
the thing,
quickly. I
and
very
you went
quickly
through
moved
that,
up
and you
through the ranks.
retired, as
Yeah.
a full W4,
Right.
which is the highest
Right,
rating that you
right.
can get as a warrant officer.
So I had about 21 years with it.
21 years, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
Now, Bob, we're kind of winding down here a little bit, and I just want to kind of go through a
Sure.
couple of things, because this is a very impressive record of service, from a young 17-year-old, enlisting, being caught up in a world war, being shipped out at a young age, being caught up in this, tremendous, worldwide effort, and in being able to see so many things at a very young age, and at the same time getting in from one career, changing that career, being so successful as a medic. And being a medic is a really rewarding thing as well. You can see the direct
you can.
results
Yes,
of
you
your
can.
service, and you're really to be commended on that. But if that wasn't enough to do all of that and to serve your country, staying in from World War II through Korea, and then remaining in the service for, another
1 year. Yep.
21 years and retiring at the top of your branch as a warrant officer 4, I mean, it's a significant achievement. And it's really a significant tribute to you, to continue to make those efforts. But here you are in Florida, and you've lived here for many years now, and you're very active with the American Legion Post, Kirby Stewart Post 24, is that correct?
I'm not that active anymore, but
You belong to it,
right.
and you participate in some of those activities.
Correct.
And I think it's a tribute to that greatest generation, individuals like you who have continued to serve and who held this great record and this great history of serving their country. I mean, what would you think was one of the proudest moments that you've had, aside from this wonderful letter of helping these missionaries? What do you think was the culmination of things? Serving as a young boy on a ship heading out to the South Pacific, helping out during the Korean conflict. What do you think is those things that you think that you're most proud of?
I tell you, I look back on all of it, and sometimes I get melancholy.
I think a lot
I'm
of
being
people
very
do.
truthful with you. I get melancholy over it, and I think, did I actually do this? Did I actually do this? And then I know that I did, and I'll turn around and I'll say, thank you, God, for my career and for my life.
Well, Bob, I think that's a wonderful comment. And I think, you know, we really are one of the greatest generations, having served in two, you know, conflicts, serving your country, you know, and dedicating your life to helping others and for the service of your country is something that you really are to be commended for. And we have some wonderful photographs here that'll be throughout this program. But also, you know, we recommend that, you know, individuals like you continue to tell their stories, because it's a wonderful opportunity for people that are young, not only to understand the sacrifice that people have given for their country, but also for people of your age to recognize the contributions that you've done. So Bob, I want to thank you very much.
And I want to thank you. You know, it's like talking with my brother. Truly.
Well,
you're that close.
the younger brother. Okay. Bob, thank you again, and thank you for watching us on this edition of Up Close. It's individuals like Robert Kyser that made a difference during World War II and the Korean conflict. Individuals like Robert Kyser who continue to show us that dedication, commitment, and sacrifice are what makes a legacy of valor. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Up Close on METV.